Hi, I'm Sandra Bilokonsky. I'm the owner of www.artofsandra.com. And today we are basically going to be learning how to make the findings for, this is a necklace pendant that's actually in works. We are going to learn how to make the findings for this, and then later on we're going to learn how to actually assemble and make this into a necklace. So first of all, we need to start off with your basic tools. You're going to need a couple of hammers, different sizes. I also have a pair of bent needles nose pliers, a pair of tin snips that have a serrated edge. You're going to need a torch and something to basically do your findings. I use this as a 1 inch or 20 millimeters, and normally I put the and kind of hammer it down, and it gives a nice circular so I can cut it out. Or for the bigger disc, you can just use the top of a medicine cap. First of all, you're going to take your metal. This is copper, and you're going to draw around your circular object. And then you're going to cut that out until it's like a piece like this. I use this to catch my scraps because it's a lot easier when for cleanup. So what you want to do, just start cutting around. And you want to use tin snips that have some type of a curvature to them because it makes it easier when you are cutting circulars. And as you guys can hear my dogs playing in the background. This is what they normally do when I'm working upstairs and not working up in my down in my art studio. So now you have your nice circle. Then what you're going to start doing is bending the metal. I started bending this one earlier, and you're just going to kind of bend it every way you want to, just kind of, because what you're trying to do is add texture to the metal for later on. Now this does take a little bit of time, that's why I kind of started one beforehand. And don't worry, sometimes you get a crack right here, but don't worry about that because it'll all pound out. And it adds to the character of the finding. Okay, now we're ready to fire it. Now when you're ready to fire this, make sure that you have a surface that you're going to fire on it that is heat proof. I'm using an old tile because I'm actually by my fireplace here. And I have a towel underneath to kind of cushion it. But I'm using basically an old tile. I don't want to crack the tiles in my house, so I'm using an old tile. And I always keep a fire extinguisher. And always some water. Just take your precautionary measurements because you are working with fire, so make sure that you at least take some precautions when you're working with fire. It's very important. I'm using the run-of-the-mill, you use it for cooking, for creme brulees, torch. I have another torch, but I'm using this torch just to prove that you can use a normal kitchen torch. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And I'm going to turn off the lights here because I want to show you how hot you want to get this metal. And it's not really going to show with the light that I have. But you're going to start seeing that it's getting that nice red glow. That's how hot you want to get the metal. And then when you get it that hot, you're just going to take your hammer and gently pound it down. Because essentially all you're doing is turning in this little area into a little blacksmithing area. Now you're going to pound it until you're happy with how flat you have it. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm going to dump it in the water that I have. And then I'm also going to do the second piece, which I did earlier. I made a small round, and I'm going to heat that one up. The hotter you get it, the easier it is to pound it out. But you don't want to get too hot because it will start to break, especially with thin sheet metal. I found for myself that my copper sheet metal breaks more than my brass. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let me turn back on my light. And turn off. Do remember, kiddos, that this is hot, so you don't want to be picking it up with your hands. Here's a disc I did earlier, and here's the one we just did. And then here's the small one. As you can see, there's a little bit of texture right there. Now the next part we're going to do is actually bring out that texture. So, ready for part 2. Okay, this is part 2, and what you're going to need is a variety of sandpapers. I have everything from 80 grit to 180 to 120 grit. I have a couple of foam pads that are actually sanding pads. You just want to want sandpaper because you're going to use a lot of it because you're using this all by hand, and you're also going to want some steel wool. Some fine steel wool, and that you're going to use at the end for polishing. First thing you're going to do is take the highest grit sandpaper you have. In this instance, I have 80. And you're just going to sand the heck out of that piece that you just fired. And you're going to notice, in just this little bit of sanding that I've done, how it's starting to bring out some of the textures. Now I'm going to put the camera on pause so I can work on this with the 80 grit paper because it's going to take a little while and I don't think you want to just see me sanding. So I'm going to put this on pause. Okay. I've been sanding a little longer now with the 80 paper, and you can start seeing the textures that it's starting to bring out. Don't worry about these little black spots. That's common with copper. That will come out later, trust me. But you want to still continue doing this with your 80 paper until you get the texture that you like. Don't forget to do the edges. Even though you use that serrated knife, it still sometimes leaves some burrs. And don't forget to do both sides. So I'm going to finish this up a little bit more with the 80 paper. sanding with the 80 paper or 80 grit paper actually takes the longest. After that, it goes pretty smoothly. Because the 80 grit paper or the heavy grit paper that you're using, depending on what grain that you want to use on your sandpaper, is what actually brings out the nice lovely texture that we have going on. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with that. It's really nice that's coming out. The next thing you want to use is your medium grit paper. This is 120 that I'm using. There goes my dogs again. I use the 3M paper, 120 grit. This paper is pretty good because it actually does stay sharper, like it claims it does. It doesn't tear up that much. This one I've been using a lot, so we're going to move that one off to the side. And do the same thing. You're going to sand. And what you're basically doing is smoothing out or sanding out the larger scratches that you just made. It kind of polishes it out too a little bit. Okay, I'm pretty happy. Yeah, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good enough. And then what you're going to do is take your finer sandpapers, and this is 180. As you can see, it's the same 3M product, excuse me. And you're going to sand again. And if anybody's ever worked on auto body cars or any type of metal work, you're basically sanding out the imperfections. So we're kind of making imperfections, so it's kind of silly. Keep sanding it. Did I mention to tell you this is the fun part about the video, is me sanding? Keep sanding. And I'm getting pretty satisfied with what I have. It's turning out nice and smooth. I don't feel any burrs when I put my hand over it. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. What I do like to do before I take the steel wool to it is I like to use my little foam block and just kind of polish it up with my foam block first. And all this is a fine sand foam block. I actually honestly do not know what grit it is. I apologize. And as you can see from just doing the off of the block how it's starting to polish up. And lastly, you want to do is take your steel wool and just polish. Now remember that black stuff I was telling you about? See how it's starting to come off? You don't even notice it's there. And keep polishing. You want to polish it until you're happy with the shine. And I think I'm pretty happy with this. Next thing I'm going to do is actually clean it up, and then we're going to make it into a jewelry finding. Okay, I've washed up the finding, and I'm just going to dry it complete. And I have, hold on one moment. I call this my little goodie jar. Some stuff I've already finished. I'm going to take one of my other finished pieces that I did of the brass. And what you're going to do is basically do a layout of what you want. And this one, I think I'm going to do copper on top of a brass, and then find a little finding here. I don't see it in here. So I'm going to go get one. I bought these little fish from Artful Market. I believe it's on Etsy. And they're little charms, but what I like to do is cut the top off, like so. If that's a little rough right there, take your sandpaper. Just kind of smooth it out a little bit. And you don't want to wipe this down. So what I think I'm going to do is use the copper in the back, a brass finding on top, and then maybe this little fish. Or use my I think that will look better. We'll use a brass back, copper, smaller, and then another little brass binding right there. I think that's going to make a pretty pendant. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use your glue. I have a nice good German glue that adheres to metal that is permanent. So that's what I'm going to use. And I make sure to lay out everything before I glue it. You're going to want to do that. First thing I want to do is glue the small piece first. And I'm going to put the glue straight on the metal here. Be a little generous. And then put my little piece on right about there. And I have these little wonderful clamps that I'm just going to make sure that I clamp that. And clamp it again. I want to keep it clamped until it dries. It doesn't take that long. This is like basically a super glue, so it doesn't take that long. Well, I'm waiting for that to dry. What we can do is work on another pendant. This time, I'm just going to adhere the little brass to the large copper. Once again, I'm pretty generous. Yeah, I think I like that side better. Take my clamps again. And this will become another pendant. I'm out of clamps. Personally, I like to get a bunch of these findings done so I can kind of pick and choose, because sometimes I don't like the one finding on top of another, or that way you can just have a mix of what you want, because not everything's going to look good together, because this one had like more black, but when I just put a nice clear one like this against it, it didn't look right. So the rougher one looked really good. So just mix and match. Just that's the artistic side of it. You just mix and match. Okay. I think this one is done. The next thing we're going to do is adhere this one on the big one. And we're going to lay it back out on again so we know where we want it. And I think right about there. I like it a little off-centered. Once again, generous helping. You want to be generous, but you want it not to be over generous. Okay, make sure that you have the fish facing the right way. And put it down. Oh! Gotta be a little quick. Once it starts setting, you can't quite move it. I put the clamps on again. There we go. And then what you do is you let that cure for at least 2 to 3 hours clamped. The next thing you want to do is add your hole. And currently my hole punch is broken. I have one on order. But to give you an idea, is there's a hole right in here. Now, once you get a finding done, or a pendant done, you add the hole where you choose to. I don't know if I'm going to make this into a necklace or a brooch yet, but you can add a hole on top right here to make it into a pendant, or you can add holes down here to add charms. Do what your heart desires to do. Here's some of the pendants and things that I've made over the last few days using this technique for findings. This is same as the fish that we did here, but I added actually some recycled seeding material that I had zapped in the microwave and cooked, and it kind of gave a nice ocean appearance. This one I added a stray pendant that I had found on top of it, and it's a really cool effect. Here's a necklace that I'm working on. It's a little bumblebee, a little stone, and this was just a piece of scrap metal that I had folded over, and then I used a jewelry finding for the necklace part. And the only thing I have to do now is just add the clasp. So at least you have the technique. You can do what you want. You can make as many findings as you want. Different styles, different shapes, hearts, circles, triangles, even little fire. It's pretty much endless. At least you have the technique down. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, just email me at Sandra at artofsandra.com. Thanks!